All right, welcome to the Big Brown Gadfly, where we give a hard time to people who need to be given a hard time, just like Socrates' horse. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about the efforts of Mass Resistance Texas with the legislative priorities that we are fighting for in Austin. Austin is the capital of Texas. And there is an epic battle over abortion, over LGBT policy, school choice. There's a lot going on right now. We need to start out by saying, do not believe the hype that Texas is this amazingly red state and that we have no problems. The Republican Party of Texas is actually thoroughly run by an establishment that is often against us. And we've had some victories that are getting us closer and closer to the finish line for things like faith conscience protections, as well as bans on certain kinds of LGBT transition procedures on children, but we still have a long way to go even on those things. They're not done deals yet. Now I have with me today, Arthur Shaper is going to be, Arthur Shopper. Sorry about that. I know about the Arthur Shopper. Okay, so he is going to be here. He works nationally with the organization called Mass Resistance. I also hope to be joined by Jeff Younger, who is the one who is really pushing the Save James bills, because he's a father who's fighting to keep his son a boy against an ex-wife who is using family court to try to transition the boy. And we also hope to have Tracy Shannon, who is the director of Mass Resistance Texas, to come on as well. First, let's start with Arthur Shopper. I know you got to run quickly, so we would just want to get to the real specific business items that have to deal with Texas. Compared to other states that you're working with Mass Resistance, where are we? Would you say that Texas is leading, or is it not leading?
No, Texas has been behind on this issue. But at the same time, it's not. It's behind, but it's not out of the game. Very disturbing when it comes to banning sex mutilation surgeries on minors. This has been a very disappointing process this year. It's really disturbing how powerful and how corrupt big business interests have become. There is a lot of money in the whole so-called gender transition process. Billions of dollars are at stake, and so big business bullied and pressured a number of states, legislatures, and political parties. Utah, which has been a GOP trifecta, Republican governor, Republican-dominated legislature for more than 30 years. It's probably the most Republican state based on those metrics. And there was a bill to ban these perverse surgeries, the whole procedures on minors, and it was re-referred to a committee. It was stalled completely and didn't even get to a floor vote. That was in Utah. In Montana, the legislator John Fuller, the first version of the bill, which banned the puberty blockers, the hormones, as well as the surgeries, that it got out of the first committee, but when it came up for a floor vote, it failed. This is shocking. And Montana is a GOP trifecta, and the Republicans have a supermajority of legislators. And Republicans voted against this. They are believing some of the most ridiculous hype and medical quackery about this transgenderism nonsense. And, John Fuller also submitted a bill to keep boys out of girls' sports. That bill faced considerable resistance. It did pass out of both chambers. It's on the governor's desk. Governor hasn't signed it yet. I don't know what John Forte's problem is, but it's very. The NCAA has bullied states and threatened to take championship games with all the money, revenue, the business that they bring out of these states if they pass these bills to protect women's sports and reject this transgender cult in the whole sports field. The good news
so
is,
I just want to, I think you lay down a really good framework to understand this, which is that Texas, there's no state right now that's just on its own. Every state is a battleground for the national fight for social conservative values. I think social conservatives across the country, we stood behind Donald Trump. We also are looking back and understanding the losses that we had under Trump because he made compromises with some of these social liberal groups on LGBT issues, etc. So all of them are fighting the same fight. In Texas, the way that it looks is this. Texas is sort of seen as the leader of the conservative movement nationwide. We have the trifecta as well. We have Governor Greg Abbott. We have both houses of the state legislature, both chambers. And we began the session with a barrage of socially conservative bills that we were able to get proposed. Now, these don't even represent a fraction of everything that mass resistance is fighting for, because we're fighting for things like school reform, cancel culture, prevention bills, things to redefine sex ed as harassment in some cases, et cetera. None of that even got bills. But in terms of bills that made it to the floor or made it to committees in Texas, we had quite a few. We had several bills that were going to stop men from being involved in women's sports. We had a lot of bills to try to prevent pediatric gender transitioning, that is surgeries or hormone blockers or social transitioning for minors. We had a lot of pro-life bills, bills to stop abortion after 20 weeks, bills to abolish abortion, bills to remove funding for abortion. We had conscience protection bills to try to protect Christians from being forced to be involved in medical procedures that went against their conscience. We had bills that were going to try to remove obscenity from schools, ban critical race theory in schools. We had a lot of bills. I mean, the activists, those of us on the ground, we definitely pulled our weight for this one. But as you know, as Arthur was talking about, it's a game very often of the committees. You know, who's the Speaker of the House? Who does he send bills to? He'll send bills to committees, even if there is support for the bill out there in the public. Very often the people who head the committees will drag their heels and they'll prevent us from being able to get a hearing. And so that's what we were dealing with the Save James bill. This is a bill that was going to prevent gender transitioning procedures in minors. So it was going to prevent hormone blockers, and it was going to prevent surgeries in minors. That bill had been referred to a committee that was headed by Stephanie Click. We were successful in mounting a massive pressure campaign to get Stephanie Click to hold a vote for that bill. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. It worked. She held the bill. We forced her to hold a vote, and then it goes to the calendar committee. And that's where that bill is right now. So I want to talk about that for a little bit, right, Arthur? So even when we celebrate our wins, we always have to be
We're not done yet
about it, because there's always a way for it to get to fall apart. So Arthur, can you explain who runs the calendar committee and how does it look right now for the Save James bill to get voted out of the calendar committee and brought to the floor of the Texas House of Representatives for a vote?
So we have the calendar committee. It's chaired by State Rep Dustin Burrows, and the vice chair is Joe Moody. And these two legislators need to get a whole lot of phone calls, emails. They need to get a barrage of pressure and outrage from the Texas community. It is inexcusable for these legislators to be sitting on their hands and not making any movement for these bills. Sid Miller, he's the agricultural commissioner, put out a great radio ad targeting Dustin Burrows and calling him out for doing pretty much nothing, not making any movement on this. Apparently he was supposed to have, made a determination today. Now we're going to have to wait a week. That's unacceptable. This should have been done yesterday. This should have been done a month ago. I'd like to bring up another aside, if you don't mind. I'll be really quick. Just the sheer amount of money that is behind this whole agenda is staggering. And this is why we've seen this battle. We've seen hits and misses in different states. I said that Texas is behind, but the good news is that Texas is still in the game. There was the bill to recognize that sex mutilation surgeries and procedures are child abuse. That actually passed out of the state Senate earlier this week. We're still waiting for Senate Bill 1311.
That is very good news. And I want to bring in Tracy at this point, because Tracy's got the latest news on all of these bills.
Yes.
That is very good news, because we did not think that the child abuse redefinition bill was going to see the light of day. And they were definitely pushing for it. Arthur brings up a very good point. We know that the corporations are going crazy on Texas. There was that USA Today piece where the corporate leaders came out and said, we're going to do everything we can. And what they do is they scare states. So they say, we're going to pull out, we're going to block you from being part of NCAA. We're going to pull out our businesses. We're going to close up shops. I don't buy that in Texas, for the very simple reason that corporations need us a heck of a lot more than then Texas needs these corporations. I mean, if you want to close up your factory here and go back to California, be my guest. But I don't think that argument should work. Let's hear from Tracy. Tracy, is that argument working? And can you tell us about the status of the Save James bill that is still waiting for a calendar date, and then the bill about redefining child abuse that just came through?
Okay, so Senate Bill 1646, let me see where it stands. Can y'all carry on for a minute? I'm getting an important call, so I'm going to mute myself.
Yes. Tracy is super busy. she's the woman everyone wants to call. So, Arthur, can you tell us about this bill that's going to redefine child abuse? It came through the Senate. And how is this approach different from the Save James bill that's in the House?
What I want to say is that this clearly recognizes the proper stigma is being imposed on these behaviors, the whole range of them, the surgeries, the puberty blockers, and everything. There is a small exception for people with intersex physical deformities. Surgical procedures are allowed in that case. Everything is taken care of perfectly. This speaks to the moral element of this whole perversion so effectively, and it then enacts all of the criminal penalties that come with child abuse. That's exactly what needs to happen. The proper role of the state is to restrain evil, to protect the natural rights of all, including children, from their perverted parents. Please let me bring this point in. I'll be really quick. This is the issue about corporate power. It's very disturbing, and I think more people should be angry with Governor Abbott right now. Governor Abbott came all out and said, I will support constitutional carry. Okay, that's great. So he supports adults being able to protect themselves with firearms without a permit. But where is the outrage about all this abuse happening to children? Why won't he go on record to protect children from this abuse? We need constitutional carry for kids then, if this is what it comes to, so that these perverted adults don't get their hands on them and cut off their genitals or fill them with a bunch of cross-sex hormones. That to me is even more important than carrying a firearm, if I may be.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that what Arthur's getting at is that there are all of these avenues for conservative activism that Republicans have been using for years and years and years to placate their conservative base, to make it look like they're warriors for something, while they have enabled a lot of this to go on with the help of the corporations. One of the things about this bill, about both of them, the Save James bill and this child abuse bill, one of the things that's different about this relative to earlier efforts by social conservatives is we're not going the route of the conscience protections. There is a bill for Christian conscience protections that I support that is going through the legislature, but it's never enough to say I as a Christian shouldn't be forced to participate in a procedure, because what that usually leads to is me as a Christian just referring that to somebody else, and the child remains the victim of this bad policy. So the child abuse bill is very significant because it acknowledges that the issue here is not really whether Christians are forced to feel uncomfortable with something given their faith. It's about protecting the children from harm. Tracy, would you agree with that?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, this is not some kind of transphobic bill. This is all about protecting children from harm. The model used to be watchful waiting, until I guess some people got together and realized a lot of money can be made off of pigeonholing these kids into transgender ideology early in age. That makes them lifetime patients, and we need to protect children from this, which is really medical predation on children.
Right. Okay. I want to just point out, if people are watching, please look at the bottom part of the screen. I'm putting the numbers of the two chairs for the House committee. These are the people who are head of the House Calendars Committee. These are the people who right now have not given a date to the Save James bill, which is coming up through the House, and we need to put pressure on them. Joe Moody represents Lubbock. That is a very, very conservative district. If you are a member of the if you are a constituent who lives in Lubbock, please call his office, tell him how you feel about this, share the urgency of getting a date for this. The other chair of that committee is Joe Moody, and Joe Moody represents the El Paso district. That is not a terribly conservative district. It is a majority Latino district. So that's one where we really need people out there. And I will try to do Spanish language broadcasts about this. I'll try to do that maybe later tonight or tomorrow, just to try to reach as many people in El Paso as possible. We really need Latinos who are socially conservative, even if you're Democrats. We don't care. This is not an area where we're going to gripe with you about whether you voted for Biden. This is about protecting your kids. And you should know also that a lot of these programs to transition children, they target Black and Latino populations, Black populations especially, but also Latino populations, because you have a lot of kids who are more vulnerable. You have a higher percentage of kids who are in the public school system, in Title I public schools. So the federal restrictions on what can be taught are a lot tighter. It gives the government a lot more control. You're more likely to have in those neighborhoods kids who have had problems with the justice system. So they may have gone to juvenile detention, or they may have been institutionalized or in the foster care system. And those are all big red flags for kids that may get recruited or pushed into gender transitioning below the age. This is a movement which preys on people who are vulnerable. Okay, I want to repeat that. It preys on people who are vulnerable. So while all of us are Christian, I'll just put my point out there. This is not about me wanting to feel good about my faith and not wanting to feel uncomfortable about this. This is about protecting vulnerable kids from things that are going to harm them. Now, Tracy, in terms of the Senate bill, does that now have to go to a Senate calendar committee, or where does that stand?
So there's not a calendars committee in the Senate that I understand. So, but there is a process, and that's with the Secretary of the Senate puts that for a vote. So the person there really to put pressure on is Dan Patrick to get him to move for a vote for Senate bills on the floor. It's my understanding that Senate Bill 1646, which designates the these treatments as abuse, did pass the Senate. So unless it's being portrayed incorrectly in the media, that one did pass. There's still, of course, in the media does seem to conflate or confuse the bills. There's still Senate Bill 1311 that I do not think has had a vote on, and that is from Senator Bob Hall, and that relates to their professional liability insurance, and that's just another angle at coming at stopping these treatments on minors. It's a good angle. It's an angle that the LGBTQ also employ with their attempts to ban counseling to like Christian worldview type of counseling to people who have unwanted same-sex attraction or who are confused about gender. So this is a good angle to come at it. It won't completely eliminate this, because in Texas you can actually practice without the medical liability insurance. It's something I think a lot of people do not know, but in this type of medicine, it's so lucrative that these butchers from out of states come here to Texas to mutilate children and adults because they don't have to carry the liability insurance. They also are covered by tort reform in Texas, which means there is a limit at what these doctors can, or their insurances can be, if they have it, can be sued. There's a limit at what you could get. And without any type of, we can't even talk about a lawsuit against these butchers because there's no baseline for the medical care, because this is all experimental. It would cost millions of dollars that no one plaintiff has to overcome that hurdle of baseline care. It would take like a huge class action lawsuit, and you still would have to establish the baseline of care and raise the funds to establish that, millions of dollars, right? And it's a roll of the dice. So that's, you know, this is a good bill. It needs to pass. It deserves to pass, but it only kind of comes at it one direction.
And which committee did, okay, so the one that Bob Hall introduced, do you know which committee that is in the Senate?
Senate Bill 1311.
Okay, Senate Bill 1311.
Yeah,
that deals with basically malpractice insurance, right?
Right, and that is with the Secretary of the Senate. So that is incumbent upon Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick to push to have a hearing or to have a floor vote on this right away. Dan Patrick and Governor Abbott have been completely silent about these transgender bills. I mean, I'm not even sure if they said anything about protecting women's sports, which seems like it would be, this really should be not controversial, right?
Right, yeah.
They haven't said anything. I mean, obviously, women fought so hard to carve out an area to compete and earn scholarship, and that's, you know, being threatened. And it's up to our legislature to enact laws to protect women.
Well, let's talk about the women's sports bills, because there are several that are in the air right now. Somebody at least introduced them in the Senate and the House. The last article that I read, they were openly saying that the corporations had bullied the chairs of those committees, and that they're not going to be brought for hearings, or they're going to die in committee. Is that true, Tracy? Or
that's the last I heard on the House version, anyway, because I believe there's two bills, one in the Senate and one in the House. And I know that the committee, that the Public Education Committee has one in their committee, and it has not left the committee. And that is a split of 6 Democrats, 7 Republicans. If all the Republicans voted for it, it could pass out. But my representative, the drunken rhino, Dan Huberty, he said that he's going to vote against that. That's what was reported in the papers. Right. I'm not surprised, because he caucuses with the LGBTQ frequently, and his voting is there with the Democrats. And behind the scenes, like, a lot of voters don't know, because he'll vote okay on the pro-life issue when it comes down to doing a public vote. But what he does behind the scenes is caucus with Democrats and add amendments that would harm our right to protect ourselves with a gun. And he also shot down amendments that were added to bills to protect children from gender disfigurement. And so he really is a rhino. His only good votes that do get recorded, you know, he's done some kind of stuff behind the scenes. So we really need to primary him and get rid of that drunken rhino. I was going to run against him, but I thankfully I will not have to, because a man from my town is going to be running against him, and it's a high-profile name, Anthony Dosafino. His father, Wayne Dosafino, is pretty well known in Texas for investigative reporting back in the day. He's been very involved, his father, in the political scene. And Anthony, following in his father's footsteps, has been very involved and conservative, involved in the political scene. He's part of True Texas Project, which is expanding in the North Houston area. So we have one of our own going to be running against the rhino, and I think that he has a really good shot, probably a better shot than I would have. So
that's good. Okay, so you did bring up the pro-life bills. I do want to mention that one as well. One of the things that happened, this is good news and bad news. The good news is, Tracy, that the pressure campaign we had on Representative Stephanie Click up here worked, and it seemed that she was dragging her heels on bringing that gender transitioning ban to a hearing in the Public Health Committee in the House. And our pressure worked, and she brought it out, and it got voted out of committee. Now, the bad news is that she is still sitting on other bills, including the abolish abortion bill. It is sitting in her committee, and she has not brought it up for a hearing. But we have inspired other people, because I'm seeing flyers all around the district where Stephanie Click represents the people, and they are saying, let's bring the pressure on her to bring the abolish abortion bill up for a vote. Now, what they are doing to try to disseminate information to stop the abolition of abortion bill from coming up is they're saying that the people who support abolition want to impose the death penalty on women who get abortions. That is a stretch. That's misinformation. That's not really what's going on. Now, I bring that up because pro-life and the LGBT issues, they tend to be the two big, hot potatoes of social conservatism. And sometimes one of those causes feels like the stepchild, and the other one feels like it gets all the attention. I know that in many past sessions, pro-life was the area that everybody was comfortable supporting, and LGBT was on the down low. Now it's kind of flipped in Texas, where there's a lot more attention on the LGBT area, and the pro-life movement has kind of died down in terms of the amount of attention to it. But we want to keep the heat on both of those areas. Now, what about the issue of stopping obscenity in schools? That was something that it was a bill that was brought forward. Is that moving forward out of committee? And does it look like we're going to be able to stop the distribution of pornography or sexually inappropriate things in schools?
I don't have my bill list with that on it, so I don't know. That was Senator Bob Hall's bill, right?
Right, he did file it, didn't he?
He did, and I forget where that got left. Let me see if I can find it on my watch list real fast.
Right.
Criminal justice.
Yeah, one of the hot potatoes is education in Texas. We saw how in Idaho, for instance, they passed a bill banning critical race theory from being taught in schools. There has been a bill like that that's been introduced in the Texas House. I think the chances are very slim that it's going to get through, given that they did not pass school choice, which was something that has huge support across the state. And we do want to get to the school choice bill, why that failed.
Well, this is still lingering in the Criminal Justice Committee, Senate Bill 978, which was brought by Senator Bob Hall. It's a good bill, but it's going to die there in the Criminal Justice Committee, unfortunately, if it is not immediately voted to moved to have a vote in the So that's very unfortunate, because this is a problem in every district in Texas. I will bet anybody who watches this that I'll bet you $10, and I do not let go of $10 that easily. I will bet you $10 there's some profane material in your schools that your children should be protected from. And I bet you $1, because I don't know what data your kids are able to use for their databases, but bet you $1 that they can access ads for pornography while they're doing their research. Because one of the most popular databases that is used across Texas in their schools is on the Dirty Dozen list for the National Center for Sexual Exploitation, because it has promoted ads for sex work and has linked to porn inside of its database. And there's no filtering that, because you're in their portal where they're responsible for filtering that stuff out, and it's coming in through the back end. So this is very important, because instead of putting all the onus on our local boards or local parents, this would cause these and there's also another bill that's good too, and I think it has moved out of committee. I'll have to look that one up later and maybe put an announcement out. But this would make somebody accountable, criminally accountable, for subjecting your kid to pornographic material, just like they would be if they did it at the park. But because they're called teachers or educators, they're allowed to put this disgusting material in front of your kids, and that's not okay.
Well, this is exactly what Tracy and I were fighting for when we went to Austin. Nobody was willing to propose a bill on this, but we wanted to extend existing anti-harassment laws, which are present in every Texas school. You cannot create a hostile learning environment by bringing in unwanted, uncomfortable sexual content that is irrelevant and forcing it on students. You also can't do that in workplaces. We wanted to make clear that a lot of these trainings, a lot of this curriculum that forces people to have conversation about arcane, weird sex practices that make people feel uncomfortable, people don't want to have these discussions, that should already be excluded by the existing laws that are there about exposing children to pornography and about harassment and creating a hostile learning environment. We have not been able to get much traction on that, and that is part of the whole problem with the Texas approach to schools. There is a lot of support in Texas for school choice, but there's a lot of money in the teachers unions, and people are not they're really not willing to throw their weight behind school choice. That did not pass, by the way. School choice, the ability to pull your kids out of one school and send them to another, it didn't pass. So I think it's going to be very difficult to pass the bans on critical race theory. or the bans on some of this other kind of curriculum. Now, the obscenity exclusion, or the trying to make sure that people can't see obscenity in school, that did make it there. But as Tracy is saying, it looks like it's going to get stuck in committee. I can tell you right now, and let me bring in Arthur for 1 second, but I can tell you right now that I already have a case where this conflict is brewing in one of the schools in Killeen. There's a middle school where the people who are in the vocational department hung up a lot of very provocative pictures as part of their promotion of trans awareness. And the one of the students who was in the school felt uncomfortable with this. It involved cleavage. It involved talking about shooting people, shooting the police. It was really inappropriate material, and it was of a sexual nature. I don't want to go into all of it. But the teacher who brought this up and raised this issue was then brought in and reprimanded for supposedly harassing the people who put the poster up. This is especially what I think we need to clarify, and the legislature needs to clarify this. When you have a school and it is under two distinct directives, it's supposed to be inclusive and give a place for people to learn about all these alternative things, but it's also supposed to be a place free of harassment and free of uncomfortable situations and free of a hostile learning environment. I believe that the directive to prevent harassment should take precedence over the inclusivity directive. That means that if you have people who want to post sexually provocative things about trans, that should not take precedence over the teacher who's concerned about a sexual harassment climate in school. Okay, Arthur, what were you going to say?
I was just really surprised to see, Texas as a right to work state having such powerful unions. And it brings up the perverse power that Dade Phelan, the Speaker of the House, has still. There have been 3 successive House speakers, and we keep being told in Texas that they're more conservative. But Dade Phelan has a 42% rating from the Human Rights Campaign. So LGBT lobbies they have a hold on him, and the teachers unions as well. It's very frustrating. And this is a part of the reason why Texas isn't that conservative standard bearer that people think it is. That's what's going on, and I think that's just very important. I wanted to bring that up. I do have to get off this call. I've got to take care of some other things, but I really appreciate you bringing me on, Bobby. And Texas team is doing great work. Thank you, Tracy, for all the leadership and inspiration that you've given to people throughout the state to fight against this, LGBT evil. And I believe we're going to see some real successes in Texas. This is really good. Great job, everybody.
Thank you, Arthur.
Take care.
Okay. Now, on that note, I do want to I want to bring it back to the focus of the 2 people who are heading the calendar committee, because these are the people who have the power to bring the Save James bill. This is the bill that would ban gender transitioning in minors, the medical procedures anyway, the surgery and the puberty blockers. That has made it out of committee in the House, and it is stuck in the calendar committee. So what could you tell us about Joe Moody and Burrows, who's the other person who are the chairs of this committee? What should people tell them if they call these numbers I'm putting up on the screen? I'm sorry, I have you on mute there. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Joe Moody is the representative out of El Paso. So we really need people in El Paso to reach out to him and let him know this is important to you. Your community is being targeted. This is a dominant Hispanic community there in El Paso, and Drag Queen Story Hour is targeting that community with gender ideology. This is a community, probably one of the few cities that we still have Drag Queen Story Hour in Texas, that we hadn't really tackled putting that down. So your children are being targeted with this in schools, and you need to know that this will affect you sooner or later. So don't be deceived into thinking that it will not. And you need to call Joe Moody and let him know you support House Bill 1399. It needs to have a vote, and that you would appreciate him helping to get that moved out of committee for a vote right away. It needs to happen.
Okay, and I will try to have a broadcast tomorrow in Spanish directed at El Paso. There's a couple of other Latino Spanish-speaking people who can come. That this is a heavily Latino district, and again, I just want to reiterate: we don't care if you're a Democrat on this issue. It does not matter. This goes beyond party lines. It's not like the Republicans have been fantastic about this issue. Tracy brought up tort reform. That's thanks to the Republicans, that you can't sue anybody for anything. It's also thanks to the right to work philosophy of the state that we can't fix cancel culture in Texas. So I think, this is something where we need to get together. Call Joe Moody at that number. Tell him this is really important and we really need to schedule a hearing for it. Now, what do you know about Dustin Burrows? He's the other chair of that committee.
Dustin Burrows is definitely feeling the heat already. There's been an ad directed at him in his district by Sid Miller. There's also been a lot of phone calls being made, and we need you to keep up those phone calls to Dustin Burrows' office and let him know that you want this moved for a vote immediately. Texans are not going to take that we ran out of time for an answer again on the priorities of Texans. And when it comes to protecting children, we really can't wait, and Dustin needs to act now.
Now, let me ask you about this. If we do get the calendar committee to schedule the Save James bill for a floor vote in the House, how close are we getting to see that come into law? What steps are there left after that? Do we need to start pressuring the governor now? What should we do?
It's already time to be asking your representative in your district, contacting them and telling them that you support it, and get them to apply some pressure internally to Dustin Burrows and Joe Moody and to other legislators. Get them to start caucusing. It is time for them to caucus for this. We expect elected Republicans to be a pro-family caucus and to caucus on behalf of Texas families and Texas children. And they have not been doing that, and we will be holding them accountable this next time. We've already got people ready to start running against these rhinos. And so give your representative a call and let them know you expect him to do or her to do what you elected them to do, that support these bills to end the gender disfigurement of minors in Texas. This is predatory medical predation on children, and it's abusive, and it has to stop. This is not about, we have got to get past looking at the cute little boy dressed as a girl. We got to get past, these, cute images we see and the narrative, because what's happening to these children is they're getting put on the pathway to medicalization, where they're taking puberty blockers, which are not reversible. Yes, they could go through some puberty later, but the harm it does to their bodies is irreversible. And the harm of cross-sex hormones for minors, that is irreversible. Okay, so if a girl grows a beard, she's never going to go back to her smooth face. She's never going to get her natural voice back. And children are doing this younger and younger. And do not believe the lie that children cannot do this. Do not believe that children are not getting surgeries, because we can prove they are, and they are getting them in Texas, because some of our parents have called gender clinics and confirmed consultation appointments for orchiectomies for males as young as 16 and double mastectomies for females as young as 14. So
that's basically to remove your sexual body parts, removing your breast and your testicles. So right. It's already happening for kids under the age of 18. That they lied. I want to repeat this. They lied multiple times in saying that this is not happening in Texas. And it is happening in Texas.
It is happening, and they say that this is done to resolve dysphoria. So this is all about doing surgeries on children and introducing chemicals to their bodies that makes them go into an unnatural state, all because of feelings. We should be helping children with therapies to accept their bodies the way that God made them. And I don't say that because I'm a Christian. I say that because we shouldn't be harming these children and making them patients for life. This is harmful medical predation, and it needs to stop. So call your representative and let them know you support this bill, because very soon this will be something they need to be voting on, hopefully.
Right. Well, as I said before you joined us, I was talking about the fact that this legislative session began. And remember, for those of you who don't live in Texas, the Texas state legislature only takes care of business for 140 days every 2 years. So it's basically 5 months every 2 years, and then that's it. They're off the clock again for another year and a half. So we started this session with so many ideas, we met with so many people, and it's come down to this. So many of them have gotten squashed. So many of the bills are dying in committee. We knew this was going to happen, but our worst fears were confirmed. And so, I would want to see a lot more than what we have in the fire right now, but at least for the things that are in the fire, we need to get those things through, because that would at least boost the morale of social conservatives in Texas, and it would at least give us a pathway to be able to bring further things there in the future. So once again, Dustin Burrows is the chair of the calendar committee in the Texas House of Representatives. This is the man who can schedule a hearing for the Save James bill to stop pediatric gender transitioning procedures in Texas. All right. If you're outraged at what happened in other states where these bills have gotten vetoed and then they had to override them in the legislature, imagine what a blow to all of us it will be if we cannot stop this in Texas, the largest conservative state. Joe Moody is the other chair of that committee, the calendar committee. We're putting his number there. So those two are very important. In terms of Tracy Shannon, how can people follow your work?
You can follow me on Facebook, Tracy Shannon, or Mad Mama Bear is my other page. I haven't updated in forever, but I will start updating it. And you can follow Mad Mama Bear on Twitter. And
well, how do you spell Mad Mama Bear? MadMamaBear.com?
All together, Mad and Mama with two N's, MOMMA, and Bear. And then I do have a blog, MadMamaBear.com, that you can, I will be posting some new material relating to this and other current stories here in the next few days. So I'm really behind because I've had some medical issues I'm dealing with, but I'll be getting that up soon.
Well, we'll be praying for you. And if you want to follow the stuff that I'm doing, this show, The Big Brown Gadfly, airs every Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can catch it on Facebook. You can catch it on Periscope. You can catch it on Twitter under The Gatekeepers Online, which is the GK Online. You can also catch it on YouTube. All right. So we're going to be churning out articles and sending reminders to everyone that we've got to make the Texas session 2021 count. We've got to get these things through, make it to the finish line. And also, the other thing is you can also use the same number here about contacting Dan Patrick. I believe we should push for a special session. I don't think that we should let them tell us that there's not enough time, and we ran out of time. They have the power to call a special session, and let's do that. All right? Thank you.